Welcome back, guys. If you are just joining us, this is INX Prime Live. Remember, we are on your screens every single Monday to Friday between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. Now, tonight we do have the honor and the privilege to have Dr. Jefferson H Khumalo in studio with us. Now, he is a researcher and an author who has recently transformed his doctoral thesis into an accessible and impactful book on gender-based violence, also known as GBV. Now, the book is called This is Gender-Based Violence, and just touching on the work that he does. Now, it is drawn from Dr. Khumalo's extensive research within the South African context. Now, he does actually join me right now into studio. Dr. Khumalo, thank you so much for joining us here at INX Prime Live.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure having you. I want to get straight into this conversation with you. Now, I do know that, gender-based violence is such a huge problem in South Africa. We have high rates of GBV in South Africa. I just wanted to know what inspired you, away from what I just mentioned now, what else has inspired you on turning your thesis into a book about gender-based violence?
Yes, a good one. During my defense, when I was defending my thesis, so the panel of the professors who were interrogating me, if I will say, they said at the end of the defense, they said to me, "This is very valuable research we came across, because this is something that is done by a male South African, and mostly this kind of information and researches are done mostly by people who are not within the perimeters of experience, of what is going on. Is something that is coming from people who are researching, but not from within the society themselves." So now they said to me, the angle that you took, this is a very important information that will need to be, to be dished out there and be given to people. And that's where the idea came of, turning my thesis into a readable material like a book.
No, I love that. And I mean, just touching on, and I know one of the biggest issues people have, when you're looking at doctors and people with PhDs, they come with a lot of academic know-how behind it.
Yes.
But the one issue a lot of them have globally is to turn a book like that into something that can be accessible to everyone out there. Now, I want to actually chat to you about that. How did you manage to structure, an academic piece of writing that is very academically profound, but to be able to take that and then restructure it or structure it in a way where it's accessible to your everyday South African person? How did you do it?
Yes. The first thing that I did, I look at the objectives. What is it that I wanted to achieve? I realized that, during the research, I did my research in 4 provinces: KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, Northern Cape, and part of Limpopo. So I discovered that the things that were driving me mostly, it was based on the leadership bankruptcy, which we are experiencing in our country as a society. And when I say leadership bankruptcy, I'm talking about from the top to the bottom. So I was fueled by that. The response, from the young people and the elderly people and the middle-aged people, men and women, I discovered that there's a lot of, blame shifting. When you ask a question, for instance, what do you think of, how, violence is arising a lot in our societies, against specific gender and all that. How do you feel about this? What is your view on that? Everybody will shift the blame. Nobody will take accountability. So now I realize that people need to be taught, because I realize that parents, in most cases, they shift the blame to the teachers, and teachers are shifting the blame to the learners. I'm coming from a teaching background. I'm an educator by profession. So now this is something that I've experienced as well. And young people also, they're also blaming the elderly people, the parents and the family. The community members also, they are blaming the politicians. The politicians are blaming the people, as a society, that they are not taking responsibility. They are waiting for the government, to be helped and all that. So I realized that nobody's taking accountability and responsibility of the ills that we're experiencing in our society. I said, okay, how about coming up with, something that will help as a guideline And I realized that what we lack is accountability and responsibility in the form of leadership.
No, it's very, very true. And I mean, I know you spoke about looking at the objectives when you were looking at,
Yes.
transforming it for the South African audience.
Yes.
We are going to touch a little bit more on the objectives of the book as well.
Yes.
But before we get on to that, I just wanted to understand, if we're going to zoom out a little bit, what are some of your personal experiences or background on why it influenced you to write a book like this? Because
Yes.
normally people would choose topics that are much more easier, like talking about
Yes.
business,
True.
self-help books.
True.
What made you actually create a book about gender-based violence?
I'm born and raised by a single woman, an elderly single woman, if I may say. I was born when my mom was, she was turning 50. So I never experienced my mother going through kind of a marital abuse from my dad, but I look at her struggles. I realize that, it has a lot to do with, life as an experience. And she raised me as a single parent. They divorced with my dad when I was around 3 years old. Then I saw a lot of emotional pain that she went through, and also I grew up as well with my my elder brother, and also I experienced some of the of the abuse that were taking place. And then I realized that no, this is not on, and I was so sensitive. I make some decisions in my life that I will not allow my child to experience or to be exposed to that kind of a situation. I will not allow anyone who they are at my custodian to be able to experience that. So I was pushed by life, and also when I look at what was going on around my life and around my community, neighbors and friends, I could see that something is not on. People are exposed to violence. People are exposed to emotional abuse, psychological abuse. And I did not like, because it's very easy to find yourself, living a life of, in an abusive relationship without even realizing that, this is not right. You just think it's okay. It's part and parcel of life. So my personal experience also contributed, if I may answer your question.
No, that's very, very true. And I mean, even things like trauma, for example, can
Trauma
become
as well,
it can
yes.
become something that
True.
becomes so used to your lifestyle. You become so immune to it that it's something that obviously people think is just part of the process. So
True.
I completely agree with you on that. I think let's just touch on the objectives of this book. Now,
Yes.
people are going to read this book. Our viewers are going to definitely go out and get this book. What's the objective, or what's some of the results that you would like to come from someone reading the starting till the ending of your book?
The first thing, to be accountable, and as we live as human beings, we need to be accountable, in each and every space that we find ourselves at. And when I say accountable, or when I say responsibility, is to be able to alleviate some of the problems which are not supposed to exist, because we are the causes or the sources of those problems. For instance, when you are a parent, you need to make sure that you raise your children in an environment where they are learning to respect other people and other genders, and also not to recycle this kind of of pandemic that we're experiencing. I call it a social pandemic. Yeah, gender-based violence is a pandemic because it is being passed on from one generation to another. Even when the government is trying by all means to make everybody aware. In one of my chapters here, I said, GBVF, and we call it gender-based violence and femicide as well. It's a national anthem to me, where everybody can sing this song, but they don't have, the understanding or maybe the magnitude, the depth of it, how it affects the community. We can talk about the 16 days of activism, and we can talk about, there are banners that we can talk about, the adverts, we can do plays and dramas on TV to make people aware. But at the end of the day, what do we do? That's where I arrive here. I said we need some kind of a teaching aid, guidance, how to detect when someone read this book, will be able to detect, even a child. That's why I made this book, to be able to suit, or perhaps to be useful to all people from all walks of life. I was talking to one of your colleagues today, but not from this studio, in SABC. I said, you know, young women in the corporate level and also in the media, you know, space, they are very likely to experience, you know, abuse more than an ordinary person in the village, because, you know, people, especially men, we have a weakness of taking our authority, or perhaps our power or our positions, want to use it in order to be able to, you know, to get what we want, you know, which is very, 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 you know, diabolical. You know, to me, you know, another person, even if it's a she, working in the same environment, we cannot expect them, you know, to submit to us because of me being a male person. They should interact with us based on the relation of the work and also the responsibilities. But I have realized that in most cases, you know, we use our masculine, you know, to be able to, you know, to achieve what we want to achieve at the expense of someone's emotions and their gender. So it's not okay. But this book will teach you to pick up some red flags where there is a sign of abuse, if I may say that. A young child will be able to pick up if there is an abusive, you know, statements. A young man will pick up when the coach, you know, is using some abusive, you know, words, and you know, a secretary will be able to pick up if, you know, her boss, you know, is crossing the line by reading this book, because everyone will be educated to be able to differentiate. I'm no longer going to the deeper end as such, like in the marriage or, you know, romantic relationships and all that. But in general, even wherever you go, you know, gender-based violence is an order of the day, but it starts very little. So if we can be able to detect at an early age, even a young boy of 5 years or 6 years or 7 years, they are able to pick up that, no, you don't talk to me like that. They understand. If we can train them at that age, or a young girl of 10 years, you know, they are able to say, no, you can't, don't touch me like that, or don't, you know, don't talk to me like that. I don't feel comfortable. My dad says, nobody should talk to me like that. Innocently so, before you can even go further to do a bigger damage. But if a child or a young girl or a young boy can be able to stand up and say, like, you know, our children today, they are so quick. Even when you can talk something that is related to racism, they'll be so quick to say, no, Dad, we don't speak like that. You know, I understand what I'm saying. Or something that is, you know, is portraying xenophobic. You know, our children, they are in private schools. They are, you know, there are children from their parents are from other countries outside South Africa. So you can't talk something that is related to, you know, to xenophobic, signs or red flags, if I may say. So that only shows us how much our children are being taught at school, that it's wrong to look at other people and judge them based on their color or their place of origin. So if this can come to a home or a family unit whereby we train our children to respect the opposite gender, to the point that when the opposite gender is acting differently or opposed to what they are taught, they'll be so quick to pick it up that, yes, you're my teacher, yes, you're my coach, yes, you are older than me, but you're not supposed to talk like this to me. You're not supposed to say these words to me. It becomes a taboo. So it's what I call an awakening. So this book is carrying such kind of, you know, information, if I may say.
No, definitely. And I think just, you know, talking about red flags, I think it's important to be able to identify them early, like you mentioned.
True.
But we are looking for an awakening as people in South Africa, and a lot of men in particular, you know, but we need leadership, and leadership involves
True.
things like finding solutions to things.
True.
Because leaders find solutions.
True.
What are some of the strategies or solutions that you can share with us when it comes to fighting gender-based violence, and not just in a national standpoint? If you're looking at communities, because that's where it starts off.
Units, family units,
Exactly. How do we find solutions and strategies, or what solutions and strategies do you have to combat GBV in community areas?
Yes, education and training, and giving. We must make sure that, because this gender-based violence is not only orchestrated to females. There are also young boys and vulnerable men who are going through that, are experiencing this into their day-to-day life. Number one, what I have learned and discovered, many or most perpetrators, they don't know that what the magnitude of pain or that they are causing to their victims. That's number one. Number two, the victims as well, sometimes they think it's their fault. They deserve to be handled in that manner or to be abused based on how maybe the situation looks like. It makes them to accept that I made him or I made her to abuse me, to speak like me like that, to me like that, to maybe to physically abuse me like that. I led him into that. Why? Because they are not taught. No one has a right to abuse you or me because of my mistakes. There are procedures to correct mistakes. It does not take violence to correct. You cannot use the wrong, to correct the wrong. You need to use the right to correct the wrong. So, violence as well, it's already a wrong. Even when the people who we are trying to use against, they've committed or they are at a wrong, but you cannot bring another wrong on top of a wrong. So that's the simple explanation which I have as a solution, that we must teach people to know that no one deserves to be abused physically, emotionally, psychologically, or whatsoever way. Everybody needs to be able to be accountable for their actions. And that could only be done at a family unit from the beginning. Children are the most, I've learned that children are good in learning from coping than when you give them a formal, teaching. I realized that children are so much interested in watching what the elderly people are doing. They copy how they speak, they copy, how they do things and all that. So that is the quickest way to make sure that when talking about leadership, when we are with young people, whether at home, at work, wherever we are, even in our communities, we must know that we are portraying something to them, the life that we are living. Now we are coming from the elections, quick one as an example. Young people and young women, they are so much eager to become, politicians as careers to them. But if you ask them what is the motive or what pushes them, what is leading them into becoming, professional, politicians, if I may say, mostly it's not because they have a heart of people. Mostly it's because they look at the current leaders, the type of the cars that they are driving, the houses that they have, the lifestyle that they are leading. Now they are not attracted to the cause. So you see, the position that you are occupying is very important. Let alone the job that you are doing day to day in the office. You as a leader, you are carrying a very serious influence, and you can use it to build or to destroy. So if someone is attracted to what you are doing as a leader, they are not actually attracted in your job. They are attracted to your lifestyle. So it's very important to paint the picture of what you are and what you are doing, but not forgetting that also your private life is also being watched by the people who are looking up to you. They are very likely to be attracted by what you are doing outside your job. So that's leadership bankruptcy that I'm talking about. Yeah. Most of the people who are leading us today in all areas of life, in all spectrums, I can say from the religious background, business, politicians, corporate and all that. Most people, they find themselves pursuing those areas, not because they know exactly what is going on there or they want to add value to that kind of a career. It's because of the day-to-day lifestyle that we're living in our townships and in our suburbs, which will attract some other people into what we are doing. So I'm still in the issue of leadership bankruptcy, that if we lead by example, we are very likely to produce a good society.
No, without a doubt. And I think, the information that you've shared and also the concepts and models that you've shared, I think play such an important role. We've got a lot of questions and comments coming in from social media saying that they're loving this conversation and they're definitely looking forward to reading your book as well. But again, Dr. Khumalo, thank you so much for joining us tonight on INX Prime Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure, guys. That is Dr. Jefferson H Khumalo, who is actually an author who has just released his book called This is GBV. Now, this is a very, very important book in particular. It is about gender-based violence in South Africa, and you guys definitely need to go out there and get a copy of his book.